Hi, I'm Steve Sapato, and I am your host for this part of the SmartFem network. We'll be covering podcasting today. I'm actually the lead podcast podcast for the SmartFem network. And it just goes to show you can't be perfect when you do these kinds of things, and you shouldn't expect yourself to be. So today I'm going to cover a few things for you, but what I wanted to talk about was how do you actually, techniques do you use to put together a podcast? So I got a couple things spread out here, and I put down interview techniques, and I'm not going to go over the actual interview techniques, but I will tell you what you need to do before you interview somebody for the podcast. And you have to do your homework. That's one of the things you have to do. So if you've decided that you want to have somebody on your podcast, you have to look them up. You got to investigate them a little bit and see if they're worthy of being on your podcast. Do they have something to offer to your podcast? And so that's important, because if I'm talking about happiness and if I'm interviewing somebody who is not very happy, you know those people? They don't have a lot to offer that podcast. If I'm talking about business success and these people have not really created their own business success and have the attitude for success, they're probably not going to work for me, because some of the people actually like talking so much about business and their own success that they don't motivate other people to create success. And that's what my podcast was about. The Harlequin Business Show is all about finding the right entrepreneur, the right business person who can help other people create success, right? So you want to have done your homework, and then you want to chat with them a little bit. Sometimes you can chat with them right before the interview. I do really well at that because I'm very good at ad-libbing. I'm very good at carrying a conversation. And so I don't have a problem when I get to know them. But some of you people don't have great interview skills, and we could certainly do that. I offer a course on interviewing skills. But what I want you to understand is if you don't have those great interviewing skills, and those people are not great at being interviewed, then you have to cover for them. So that's a tough place to be. So make sure that when you've talked to them, that they're worthy, again, of being on your podcast. Will they fit with you? Will they mesh with you? And so we have to also understand their passions. So when I lay it out, I say, you have to understand their passion. And by that, I mean, sometimes, they can be doing something, but they might have a passion about something else. And when you get on that sidetrack, suddenly you find yourself going in that direction, and it won't match up to what you've got scheduled to talk about. So you have to be really adept at bringing them back from where they were. Be conscientious enough to not offend them when you do it. I've seen podcast people who, I've seen interviews. Matter of fact, I've seen national interviews where the people were really good at interviews. But if we're not comfortable and it doesn't match with us, then we can't do it. So we have to understand what their passion is. And then we also you have to be good versus new in your interview skills. If you're really good at ad-libbing, at picking up the pieces, at filling in the gaps, that's really great. But if you're a new podcaster, if you're new to interviewing, then you have to hone your skills. So make sure you've got your questions, exactly what you want down, and then pay attention. It says keep an eye. Keep an eye on your guests. So a lot of times we run a split screen if you're blessed enough to be able to use a video. But if you're just on audio, then you have to listen for the softness of their voice as they stop talking, because there's nothing worse than a 2 or 3 second gap. I mean, here it is. What were you just talking about? Yeah, see, a 2 or 3 second gap is a lot to have happen in an interview. So, and then you have to go back and edit all that out if you're good enough to have that great editing skills. Make them look good. Your job is to make the person you're interviewing look good, asking the right questions, getting them to open up to you so that they can sound really good as opposed to stiff and stifled. I've interviewed some people who were so stiff, and yet we carried it off because I could create a nice atmosphere and maybe some humor that would lighten the mood for them. Then it says, give them time to promote. Well, you got to give them opportunities to promote their website, their books, their speaking engagements. And I do that 3 or 4 times throughout my podcast, because I want them to gain something from this. And I want people to always look at me as the guy who gave them the opportunity. Over here is always be gracious even to the jerks. Yep, some of the people will be really jerks to you. That's all there is to it. So you have to be gracious to them and give and give and give. And here's what I want you to understand. It's your podcast. If after the whole podcast and interview is over and you're not happy with how they treated you, with what they did, guess what? Don't put it on the air. You have that option. There's no contract here unless you're paying them or they're paying you. If they're paying you, then you got to put them on, right? That's one thing. And that's what I haven't reached that place where people are paying me yet. I doubt they will. But we love how they get expanded coverage from being on both my happiness agenda or on my Harlequin business show. Next thing is schedule, and remind. When you schedule somebody in, then you should remind them that they're going to be on. So if I've scheduled people 2 or 3 weeks out, my job is to remind them every week, hey, looking for you. And then within 3 days, remember we got this. Within 2 days, remember we got this. The day before, remember we got this. And the morning of, remember we got this. If they do not respond to the last 2, write them off. Simple as that. They're not going to show up for your podcast. That's what happens almost every single time. They're not going to show up, whether you're calling them or they're calling you. They're not going to be there. And that's a shame, but they pass that opportunity. So just schedule and remind. And then be ready to replace them. If you're doing a live podcast, which I highly don't recommend unless you're absolutely phenomenal at interviewing like me, remember that you can replace them at any point in time. And then edit everything down. And when I say edit, I mean edit again. A lot of times when we do a podcast, the voice quality is different, which you almost can't help sometimes depending on the microphone or the situation they're in. But the volume levels, oh my gosh, I've listened to so many podcasts where the volume levels don't match. And you do. I have to go in and cut. Let's see, they talked for 10 seconds, so I have to cut that. I talked for 20 seconds after they talked for a minute and a half. I have to edit that. We talked for another 15 seconds. You see, sometimes it'll take me 2 and 3 hours to edit down a 35-minute podcast so that we all sound good in the podcast. And remember to export and tag them before it comes out. Give them the opportunity to listen to it and see that they're happy with it. If they're happy with it, or if they don't say anything, then you can go ahead and schedule and put it out. And when you put it out, make sure you tag them and anybody else who's with them, because that's what you want is exposure, isn't it? So make sure you tag them wherever you're putting it so that you get more exposure. I think I've gone way over my time. This is Steve Sapato. You can reach me at steve@stevesapato.com, or I'm also a business coach, steve@profitbuildercoaching.com. Love to hear from you on my podcast, and come in. One is on iTunes. One's going to be going on iTunes soon. And subscribe to my podcasts, and let's get this rolling for you too. God bless. Oh, are you still here? I love that from Ferris Bueller. I love it. But you're still here, right? Gotta go. Bye.